Do do do. You know what that means? It's on like Donkey Kong. The Kong is on. Bomb, bomb, bomb. We got the peoples. What? 25? 25? I don't know. That's dirt. We got peoples already. We got Ashes. We got Polly. And we got Q-Tech. Alright. So, we got hodgepodge of stuff. The mail shelf is filled back up. Technical Engine, welcome. Greg, welcome. Fancy Sauce, hell yeah. Okay, 2010 MacBook Pro. I assume it's probably liquid damage, like all of them. We're doing Dave. Double Dave. Osmond, how's it hanging? How's it hanging? E-Digit. Is that Nate's Tech Service? I like that. Sharif, how we doing? Alright, so what we're doing is we got a few mail-in items. This is the last one in the box. I had one earlier. It was a 6S Plus with no flash. The IC itself had died and then trolled me for about an hour. And then I finally got it working. The actual diode somehow was messed up in the flash and was causing the chip to short out. What actually burned the chip out, and we replaced both of those and now it works. But anyway, oh, what's up, Nate? Makes sense now. So what's new? Nothing much, just working. Alright, so this one, this iPad we got here, let me show y'all. Get it up to where I need it. Alright, so iPad mini. I still don't have my second camera hooked up, so you'll have to bear with me. This one was sent in for TriStar, possibly. So it was not turning on properly, I guess, and not charging the battery. It was just try to turn on and turn off, I think, is what they were experiencing. Not too detailed on the notes on it, but so the first thing I did is I opened it up, and on my amp meter, if I have the battery unplugged, which the battery is unplugged, if I plug it in, my amp meter will bounce for me if TriStar is working. So it goes from about 20 milliamps, just draw off the LEDs on this little charge thing here. And when I plug it in, it goes to 60 milliamps, 100 milliamps, 150 milliamps, and then it cycles back to 0. How's fatherhood? Not yet. We got 2 or 3, maybe 4 weeks. We don't know. Yeah, Ashley's really excited.
3 weeks.
Ashley's super excited. Nate Parker. How you been, Paul? Haven't seen you in a while. But anyway, so TriStar seems to be reacting properly. Thank you, Q-Tech. So I don't think it's a TriStar problem. So the next thing I did was like, okay, well, TriStar seems to be working. Let's see if it'll give us an image on the iPad to make sure that PMIC is letting everything turn on. Usually though, with PMIC failure, you won't get any reaction from TriStar, I don't think. At least that's been my experience in the past. But with the battery still unplugged, here, I'm just going to plug in my charger and show you how my TriStar reacts with my little DCM board. So see how we get the Apple logo even though I don't have the battery plugged in? Now it's going to cycle, it'll shut off, and now it's going to come back on again as TriStar tries to boot the phone again. Alright, so as soon as I unplug it, it shuts off. So I knew TriStar was working. I knew that PMIC had to be working since we were getting image. So I hooked up my battery here, and let's see what it does when we hook up our battery. So battery's hooked up. It's pulling 250 milliamps right now. We're not getting any logo yet though. Now it's pulling 1 amp. So we think, well, maybe the battery's charging. So we're getting an Apple logo. So we're pulling 1 amp. We should be charging the battery right now, and we get Apple logo. But let's see what happens. So we're still showing the Apple logo. We're now pulling 500 milliamps. Can you use iPhone 7 TriStar on a 6? Yes. It is a boy. Alright, so we're still showing the Apple logo. We haven't booted up yet. iPad mini takes a little while sometimes. Let's see what it does. It still hasn't booted. Have I tried putting it in a bag of rice? Yeah, actually I did. Alright, so it's booted up right now. So it says it's charging. It says the battery's at 1%. Now let's see what it does. We're gonna leave it here, and we're gonna see how it acts. So earlier it was not booting up. This is actually further than it's gotten. But what would you think? It says the battery's at 1%, but we're only pulling about 500 milliamps, which is an odd charging percentage. Normally these should pull an amp or more on my meter whenever they're dead like this, but we're gonna keep the screen on. But what would you think would keep the device from actually charging? And in my case earlier, it was looping. It would turn itself off and then kick back to the Apple logo and do the same thing over and over. So what possibilities here would we have when doing a screen replacement, it looks like, to cause this device not to want to charge properly? So this device was opened up for a screen replacement, and now it won't stay on. What's the name? His name will be Cassidy. Tigris AP gas gauge. Okay, so Spectre, your thinking is correct. These don't have a Tigris though, but part of what you said is exactly what the issue is. So it's a gas gauge line. So what this device is doing, and I'm surprised it stayed on, never fails when you're on stream. Shit always fucking works. What this device should be doing, which it's not, so as soon as I unplugged it, it shut off even though the battery's plugged in. This device is not seeing the battery information properly. So if you're changing out a screen, what possibly could you do to cause a battery SWI or gas gauge line issue? What would cause a gas gauge problem? You don't have a TriStar, or you have a TriStar, you don't have a Tigris. Excuse me. I've been calling those two the same thing all day. Noob move. Battery sense line, yes. Check the fuse accidentally. Okay, so repairs Dr. Boom. You are correct. So knocked off one of the tiny resistors. Well, it's not a resistor, but they did knock off something. So if we come over here in our battery connector and we zoom in here, and let me get it in focus for you, what do we see? There's something gone there. So whenever they were unhooking the battery, they knocked off a component that's supposed to be right here. What's up, Freddy? So that component looks kind of important, and if we look at the connector itself, you can see this is going to be our power rail right here. See how it goes? It's separated on the board. You can see the cutout in the solder mask. or the masking on the board. So this is our power side, this is our voltage side. And if we go down here, you can tell this is ground because there's no cutout. It's directly connected to ground. But if you go to the center ones, you can see there's cutouts around them. These center ones are data lines. So one of these is going to be a data line. So it's not a missing capacitor, it's actually a missing filter. And that filter is pretty much acts like a fuse, but in this case, I mean, it's not technically a fuse, but that's its purpose. So we're going to switch over to the schematic here, or the board view, and we'll look at the iPad mini, and we're going to zoom in, and I've already highlighted that part, but this is the connection we were looking at. So if you click on that, you can see that's battery SWI con meaning connection. If we go over to this other one, that one is battery NTC. So on newer phones and newer batteries, the NTC, which is your temperature control, that's what tells the iPad what the battery temp is. Now all that information is passed through on the BAT SWI.
I like just mess around my own computer and I do stuff to it, and like I know how it works like on the inside, but I want to learn more so that I can get some experience, and I don't care if I have to work for free for that, you know?
I mean, I think like with...
Are you wanting a part-time or full-time?
I go to school, I'm 16.
Okay.
So probably part-time.
How many hours were you working over there?
Huh?
How many hours were you working over there?
I was working 4 to 7, Wednesdays, Fridays. I had to go to my mom's on the weekends.
Okay.
So like, I have basketball on Wednesdays, but the season's almost over.
Okay.
So I'll be able to...
If you don't mind, write down your hours that you would be available, and then if you're looking for something just to learn, I mean, we can work something out for you.
Just write it in here and everything. That way.
How many people do you guys have working?
It's just us.
And sometimes
We
it's
have-
him here and
yeah.
him and Franklin, and sometimes Mike is up here, but it would probably be you and him.
Okay. Yes, I do want to learn.
Okay.
Eventually, like, I do need to get paid, like, farther down the line, but I want to actually...
Well, I mean, I would probably pay you up front because you're going to be working, so.
Yeah, like when my brother-in-law started, he didn't really know much about the stuff, but then we paid him like every job he did, we paid him.
Sorry for coming in here and bugging you guys.
Oh, no, you're
No,
fine.
you're
I
fine.
really wanted this, man. I'm gonna check my basketball schedule. I can do other things for you guys too, like web design and stuff. I actually just started with this online.
Yeah, I have like a personal
Oh, Lord. I know about that.
That's why I have all of everything.
You guys do like repair computers, right?
Yep.
I really just, I wanted to get like work experience in doing that because I'm going to college for computer science, and I kind of want to get like a PhD in it, but I know that's probably not just Okay, so my last game is February 2nd.
Okay.
So
This week.
we can be pretty flexible on that
Yeah.
stuff. So.
I'll make them look at it and call you if I can't remember if you're curious.
Yeah, it should be on there. It's 12/97/2021. I actually just updated it, like,
Oh,
for you guys.
okay, cool.
Alright, thank you so much.
No problem.
See you.
Alright. And full dental and medical from day one. And retirement, please. So anyway, so as far as the temperature goes, so the battery itself has, if you look at the bottom of these battery boards, they have their own circuit board, logic board built onto them. So if you open this up, you can see they have their own logic board, and this board will have temp sensors, voltage sensors, like it has its own gas gauge stuff built in. So the gas gauge line on the actual board, Chris, this iPad draw any amps from the charger when the screen is off? I'm not sure, Osman. It probably doesn't, to be honest. As soon as you unplug the charger, it dies immediately. So it doesn't know the battery's there. It doesn't know the current charge state of the battery, so it just kills it off immediately as soon as you unplug it. So our obvious issue is going to be the fact that our filter for our battery SWI line here is missing. So the first thing we need to do, we'll need to go in here and clean this up. So it's always best to just go ahead and clean up the area a little bit and add some leaded solder. That way when you come back in to put a new filter or anything on there, capacitor, whatever the part is, it's gonna want to slide into place a little better. If you just have that old solder there without any flux, you could do this with flux only, but with the leaded solder it doesn't require as much heat. It makes it a little easier to work on, especially around battery connectors and stuff when it's plastic. So how's the other store coming along? It's still pretty slow. We're picking up though. I shift a lot of the stuff that I don't need to do down to Micah. Micah can handle most of those. Could you change the capture? Capture on what? Like the board? Or are you talking about before I switched it so you all could see it? Alright, so now we've got our filter pads tinned up. What's up, Scoop? Let me grab a board and see if we can snag that. Which one? Oh, really?
Yeah.
Cool.
Because we have no what to count.
Alright, so if we look here on this one, you can see it's got the same components, but there's our missing component. We're going to go ahead and meter those. Have I checked the battery? Has over 3 volts. Again, this isn't, I don't think this is going to be a battery problem until we solve our SWI issue. If the battery is not reporting voltage on the iPad, it can definitely throw off the device from working properly. So after testing that filter, the filter is good. I'm just going to come over here and grab it. Hopefully I don't shoot it off the board. Okay, I've got my filter. And now we're going to place this on our board here. And with that flux and that solder in place, it should pull it into place once it heats up. Okay, it's in place. I'm going to take my tweezers and just make sure it's tacked down. So by doing this, I'm just going to press on the center of the filter those up a little bit. Okay, so our filter is now soldered on. Let's clean up that flux. So take our nice 99% alcohol here. That filter's a little off center, but as long as it's soldered, it should be okay. I'm actually going to move that. I don't like how far off that is. It almost looks like it's past the pads on the other side. So to fix that, we're just going to pick it up and move it over. Okay, now it's soldered on both sides for sure. Clean it up a little bit. No flux means problems. Okay, a little better. Acetone fanboy, yeah, I was. Still I am. It's just we've got a bunch of isopropyl left, so I'm gonna use it all up. It's 99%, so it does a good job. Got some flux still down in our connector there, so we'll add a little more. Alright, so that should be plenty. Now let's hook up our battery here. And hook up our screen first, actually. Perfection is good. Perfection gets you in trouble sometimes, though. Because then you start trying to get everything perfectly straight and you end up knocking something else. In this case, probably not so much, but... Alright, so... let's set our screen back down, and this time I'm going to hook it up. Let's see what it pulls. So it's pulling 1 amp immediately now instead of just sitting there. And now look, we have an actual charging icon. Before it went straight to the Apple logo, no charging icon at all. And we're now pulling a solid 1 amp with the device still off right now. It's still showing the charging logo, so it means what was happening was our battery was so low that it actually didn't have enough power for the device to be on. But since our battery SWI line was not functioning properly, the device was booting up whenever the charger was present, because the iPad, for all it knows, is the battery's at 1%. It's got enough I can turn on. So it was allowing it to boot. And thus, whenever it was booted up and I unplugged the charger, it shut down immediately because the battery wasn't supplying enough power. And again, that relates back to the fact that the battery itself couldn't tell the phone, hey, I don't have enough juice, we need to stay off, let me charge up some. So, that one is solved. We'll let it keep charging. It's still pulling a full amp. Still hasn't booted up yet. I would guess that it'll probably take about 10 minutes and then it'll boot once that battery's charged up some. What's the best way to remove flux? I mean, the absolute best way, they have flux removers which are really good. They can be a little corrosive though. the best way, if you just want to run things through the ultrasonic, you can clean them up really well. A good high quality acetone or IPA isopropyl is a very good option too. Thank you, Ian. I appreciate it. So really just a good cleaner, like alcohol is plenty. The higher the better. But you can use 70% and stuff. I just don't like to add. I don't like to introduce water to the situation. Not that I don't think the water in isopropyl is going to contain anything. Most likely it's distilled anyway. It's just there to dilute the mixture, but you can buy 99 on eBay fairly cheap. I know.
It is iPhone 6S.
Yeah, I can go.
I was gonna get I don't have
Yeah, I
she's
moved.
outside, my contact number is.
I'm in my back position now.
I said, you know it's bad when you come all the way
Or
here. I said I can't find any place in
It's a 6S
Dawson
Plus.
Springs
6S
that.
Plus. Oh. You want to keep the phone on?
Bow, bow, bow. Bow, bow, bow. Bow, 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 bow.
Where are you from?
Dawson Springs, my daughter goes to school here, and there's
Oh.
no place that I can get that works on when I
Or when you're
am
available?
off work. She said, Mom, they do a great job, they've done mine more than once. I said, yeah, sure. I don't have
Any iPhone 7 Plus fixing today? Maybe. Maybe. Got some problem on iPhone 7 today. The booting up works okay. Draw amp from charger, but once screen goes off, it doesn't try amps from charger. It's probably Tigers. I don't trust them. Would flux as an insulator? No, it would act as a conductor, depending on the flux. Possibly corrosive. Yes. Yep, yep.
Whatever gets him through.
I know, if that gets him fixing that, that's fine.
It's like I know he sounds like a crazy person. He's actually talking to other people. We were listening to you talk and make weird noises.
So he's just working the chat. I thought, oh, he don't exactly work. That's okay.
No.
What you gotta do?
Hey, get you through it. That's okay.
People are asking about Flux.
I like
That's how people feel when you're talking on Bluetooth headsets.
I know people used to scare me when I worked at Petco because they have like a little Bluetooth thing.
I be answering all
They would come up and start like talking, and I'm like, oh, you're not talking to me.
I
And one lady, I thought she was like talking to the fish, but she was talking in her Bluetooth thing, and I was just like, yeah, whatever, yeah.
I only talk to myself when people aren't around.
I'm like, alright. I talk to people sometimes.
Self motivation.
I'm saying it out loud, like. I'm
Flux
sure-
normally isn't
yeah.
conductive. Yeah, it's not. Normally it's not conductive, but when it sits there, it can corrode components, and when it does, that metal and that oxidation can become conductive. And that's where you get in trouble.
Where did you say you were going?
Thousand Springs.
Where is that?
It wasn't, it's about an hour and a half. I came up here for training today, and since my dog lives here, I said, let's go meet Saturday night. And I said, oh, sometimes that means I was your phone all the time. She said, oh, E-Pass. I said, we don't want to visit. She said, how much your phone doing like that? I said, well, I dropped it on the wall. It had a case on it, a glass protector, it just kind of, a rocket, just one. It's just 11 to get the dust around it. That's the first one I've ever done.
They can have just like the easiest little thing. Like I'm pretty rough on my phones, and like my friend Blaze like tossed her phone on her couch, and it slid off on the carpet and just shattered.
I just dropped it, I had it in my hand, and I put the rock in it, just I was
Flux itself doesn't conduct electricity, but when flux sits, it can become conductive. Because what happens is when it's touching metal, if it's not properly burned off, the metal will start to corrode because of the acids in the flux. And as they corrode, they start to form oxides in the flux just from the metal touching it. And thus, once that flux kind of gets populated with rust and stuff, pretty much rust, I mean it's oxidation of solder, so that oxidation will become conductive, and the flux itself will hold those conductive particles in them. So technically the flux may not be conductive itself, but it does become conductive because of the particles that are suspended inside of it. You can put flux on a board and turn it on with a short, and it's not gonna, or you can turn it on with flux on the board and it's not gonna short out. But if you let it sit there long enough and it hasn't reached a proper temperature to burn off the organic material in it, it will become conductive. If you look at older fluxes, they're actually it's recommended that you wash the boards afterwards, because they will corrode the materials, and as it corrodes, those particles start to they slough off, and they can actually be suspended in that flux. Yeah, if not properly cleaned. As long as you clean it okay, you'll be fine.
And I had a really nice taste on it that I bought at AT&T.
Yeah.
If the flux has been burned and then hardens, it can be a it could be
I
a
was scared. I got
not
the
necessarily.
7 Plus, like right after it came out, and I was.
I don't know if it would become a barrier per se, but it can definitely
And it was
stop
right
communication
before I had to go
if the
to
flux
the
is heavy enough
to come
in one spot that it physically prevents the connection.
And that's what happened.
If you heat flux up on a board and then let it cool and dry, you'll see it. It forms almost a hard layer, and that can prevent connection properly because it almost makes like a plastic layer in between the two, even though it's not really a plastic.
And I was like, he's gonna murder me. Yeah.
What's up, Marway?
Luckily, I picked it up and it just had a crack across it. I thought it was a crack in the screen. But I was like, I can't even look
I
at
mean,
it.
flux is
Took it off and
is a necessary evil, kind of, in this work. Like, it's not really evil per se, but it can become a problem for you. I've had phones that I've seen that have had flux in them when they come in, like the ends of capacitors where there was flux on it has actually started to deteriorate.
yeah,
No clean just means it's an organic flux that's supposed to properly burn off during proper soldering temperatures. So the reason they call it no clean is because the temperature that the solder melts at is higher than the temperature that it takes to burn off all the organic material in the flux. But the problem is, if you don't reach a high enough temperature, or when you heat it up the flux runs away and it's on a different part of the board, that flux may not reach a proper temperature.
right wrist is like my left wrist.
Thus you're leaving organic material on the board that again causes corrosion.
Her wrist just hit the concrete. She was like, oh my god.
A no clean flux is just an organic flux that's supposed to completely vaporize or burn off at a temperature below, well, not vaporize, but burn off and become inactive at a temperature below where the solder melts.
Yeah, he can heat it up and just take the glass. Yeah. And
Oh,
it makes
do it like he does yours again. Oh, they're right, especially where you're college now.
oh yeah, when Western
PRA? I don't know what PRA stands
It's
for.
pretty busy here. We have a store down in Franklin.
Yeah, you should always clean up with alcohol after you're done soldering. It looks better, and you don't want to leave any chance of anything behind.
Yeah, everybody down there's got like a iPhone 4. Like, I swear that's.
Let me check our iPad that's been charging now for a little while. Still says it needs to charge, so the battery is still
We
dead.
don't even keep them in stock. Like, we have. I started keeping them in stock up here because after we opened up in Franklin, I had to start ordering screens and charge cords.
So the battery on that thing may have been really dead.
I have not seen this many.
I have not
This
seen
big
it for,
or
oh my goodness, like I said, it's been a bit, I mean, I still have it, and it still looks brand new.
Prior repair attempt.
Fair of
Yeah, that's probably true.
That's why when I did that, I still, I thought Christmas was
I've always been interested in buying some actual rosin tree sap, like flux, and seeing how it does. It comes in a hard crystal,
my mom, she has kept like.
and it's
all
actual
the
tree sap.
This box was full, like, when I got the 7 Plus, I went down there and she was like, I found.
They use it a lot in other countries. They use it here too, I think. I've just never used it personally.
That thing, like, the one I had a rough life, and I did, like,
the one the girls had, it has definitely, you can tell it been through.
and it was my backup phone. It had chunks missing out of it, because I was going to Target one day, I was talking to my friend, Rebecca,
Colophonium.
and this big bug, I don't know what it was, but it landed, like, it was on my hand. There was
It's
this
really
big
cool
pebble
stuff.
on my
I've
face.
seen a lot of the
Yeah.
Vietnamese and
Phone, like, down
Chinese
the parking
workers
lot.
using it.
And then I picked it up, she was still on there.
They take little chunks of it and break it off, and then just use their tweezers to melt it.
Oh, wow.
That's the screw.
They gonna work for it.
It was, they were so expensive, and I was just telling
If I can find a screen that works.
We fixed that type of stuff too. We got a couple back there right now. 2 ocean phones, and we do a lot of mailing stuff. And a toilet phone.
And Christmas was like, took the toilet phone, she put it in her pocket.
One that just yeah.
I had a kid that was in Florida, got me a message, this is my wife's phone.
Okay.
Okay, thanks. One of my girls were in the Bahamas when she got back, we had to call this number. I lost it.
Pissing in the wind.
Oh, no.
Okay. I said, she said, Mom was there, and I think there was the one for what's going to be bad.
It's not good.
I said, that's
Okay,
all.
screen is on. Go ahead and put our shields down.
I hear all kinds of stories. So far, I've been very lucky not dropping in this toilet.
Yeah,
I usually would take it out of my pocket.
yeah, I haven't for.
If I just came around the ring myself, I mean,
No, I just be like,
yeah.
maybe it'll go on fast.
All of that.
All funny.
And one of my girls used her ID to remember the name tag in there. She said, I can see it, but
No.
she said it's a flush on down. She saw that in and out. I said, no, it's not mine. I said, I'm sure it's mine. I said, the thing like, it's not like you do it every day. I said, it's not like home.
Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah, I get it. This is not like home where it's just your kid.
Union repair stencils. Yeah.
Usually you probably have to put your hands in
Yeah,
your
your
own
own
clothes.
They put toys in. But thank God the two that did that are grown.
TouchWorks.
Human face,
Camera
but
works.
I've had cats forever, and one of mine like trained me that I put the toilet seat down all the time because she would take the cat and just drop it in the toilet, and I'm like,
Okay.
yeah,
I had one that threw everything in the trash. Everything. Keys, shoes, checkbook. It didn't matter. How much check on the bags. I'm gonna ask whether we can log this
I'm bringing someone.
Yeah. Sorry, Chris, I've been by myself all day.
Oh, you're fine, man.
Thank y'all.
No problem.
Yeah.
Have a good night.
You too. Alright, it's done.
Done?
Yep.
See how she does that so quickly.
He's super fast. If I would still be working on it for
Thank you, congratulations.
Thank you. Like 3 more
Thank you
weeks.
so much.
No problem.
Hey, well, you look really good for 3 more weeks.
Thank you. I feel like a cow, but
Oh, no.
thank you. It makes me feel better.
I was 200 pounds with my first one. You're wonderful.
Oh, thank you.
And
Yeah.
congratulations.
Thanks. You have a good night. I'm gonna put David's name on here because it just says Liam.
I'm gonna work on it right now.
Okay.
Because this is what somebody asked for. They said, hey, are you going to do an iPhone 7 Plus on stream? Yes, we are, right now.
Did you message April?
You're far too drunk for this.
Can you still let him call the guy that owes us money?
Oh, I'll just call him in the morning. Write his number down so I have it.
On a hot pink post-it note.
No forum like Justin, no thanks. What will I know? Let me look up here. Add TCRS, he'll find it. TCRS is good.
Mike has sent a message a second ago. He said the keyboard is plastic riveted in, just making sure you want it full on,
What?
Mike said the keyboard is plastic riveted in.
Oh,
Make sure you want
well
it
then don't, just unplug it and see if it'll boot up. I thought it, like the keyboard just came out of it. No idea how bananas I am.
Cassidy has a onesie that says bananas for mommy.
My stencils I've used for a while. I haven't had any problem out of them. I don't understand why people struggle so much to reball. I think a lot of people use too high of a heat or too high of a airspeed, or they don't dry their paste out enough. I've gotten to the point now where it's usually impossible to mess up a reball. Although that also comes with practice too. So I literally did hundreds of touch ICs before I ever started reballing like bigger chips, and that really helped out. Like, you really kind of get an idea of how it's gonna act whenever you hit heat to it. Anyway, so this is an iPhone 7 that was in here the other day, and I didn't know how much air, how much heat. Well, I mean, that's really indicative of what station you're using, and how you personally hold your device, and how hot it actually is, and your relative humidity, how warm it is in your room at your altitude. I mean, there's a lot of stuff to really worry about there. A good starting point for reballing with lead paste, 330 at low airspeed, like a third. I mean, I reball at 350 at 50 airspeed, but a lot of people have trouble with higher airspeed. So 50 on my unit is half. So if it goes to 12, it's 6. If it goes to 100, it's 50 for me. So Celsius wise, I would start at 330. That's where I would start at 330 degrees Celsius at about a third of your airspeed. You stopped reballing them. I don't like doing that, Alex. I've tried that on a few of them, and it seems to not be very strong sometimes. I had one that I did like that, and it returned. But I mean, to each their own. I don't mind reballing them. Reballing takes me only a few minutes. I mean, I did 6 touch ICs today in like, what, 3 hours? So, I mean, it doesn't take very long to do a touch IC anyway. Every time 3D stencil got bent, moved up towards air, which led the paste spreading everywhere. Are you pressing the IC, or pressing the stencil down when you're reballing? Reballing the baseband is, I mean, it's a little difficult, but it's not terribly difficult. Large writing ICs have not come back since you stopped reballing them. I could see that, I guess. Less heat on them. Pressing the stencil and it still comes back. Okay, so we will pull a baseband CPU right now, and I'll reball it on stream so you can see what I do. What's up, Promise? Alright, so here's one that has baseband CPU still on it. Huh? Yeah, $100. Alright, so baseband CPU right there. So let's go ahead and remove that IC. Hey, our iPad's finally on, and it's still pulling 1 amp. So you can see we're on the welcome screen. Press the button here. Actually, swipe. So you can see we're on the setup screen. Now when I unplug it, iPad still stays on now, not plugged in. Plug it back in, pull in a full amp. And our battery percentage is now at 3%. So we're charging the iPad now. So our issue was our SWI line. Alright, so baseband CPU. We're going to go ahead and pull this one. So first I'm going to put down some flux around the outer perimeter of the baseband CPU. As you can see, I've scavenged this board for parts. That's why it's missing quite a few chips. Alright, so I'm going to heat up the CPU. I mean, I'm sure if you've got it off, you know how to remove a chip. So this might be just pointless to watch for you. But I'm just going to keep tapping it as I heat it up. Okay, so it's melted now. I'm going to grab the chip and lift it. So we got our baseband CPU off. Looks like it's got a few pads lifted. Let's see what those pads are. Oh, big surprise. One of them is the GPS line in the top corner here that always breaks off. When it causes searching issues, the one next to it comes off. Always. Not all the time, but most of the time if they're separated, it'll come off immediately. Yeah. Alright, so next thing I'm going to do is clean up this chip. I'm going to do that by wicking it flat, because I want to get rid of all of that lead-free solder. So let my wick heat up, and now we're going to wick it down nice and flush. Okay, so that has removed all the solder. Now we're going to clean that up. We're going to make sure our surface is clean. So just clean off all the old flux. We don't want anything on the chip that's going to cause our solder balls not to want to go on their pads. Okay. Okay, let's dry that out a little bit. There you go. We can see our baseband CPU is now clean and ready. Let me grab a paper towel. This paper towel is going to be there to help the chip keep from moving, and also kind of gives me a cushion so when I press down it doesn't stress the chip too much. Let me grab my stencil, clean it up, and make sure our holes are cleaned out. My fan over here is blowing my shit around. I have to keep my hand on it. Alright, stencil's clean. This is the 3D stencils. This one's dirty as hell. Nothing special about it. We're going to line it up. Okay, that's how it goes. Alright, so I've got all my holes lined up there. I'm going to take my paste. My paste is dried out a little bit. That way it doesn't boil up as much. There's not as much flux in the paste. There's still flux in it, but it's just not very much. So I'm going to make sure I get a good even coating down inside of there. I want to make sure that it's going to reflow and reball at an appropriate sizing. Now I'm not going to turn my air speed or my heat down because I'm pretty used to working with it. So I'm going to start heating this up. I don't want it to boil too much, so I'm just heating. Okay, so I'm about halfway across the chip. I'm going to move over. Okay, so everything is melted. Let it cool for a second. I'm going to lift it up, and there you go. Your baseband is reballed. So I'm going to take my tweezers, holding it, and just heat it up a little more just to make sure that these are all set on their spots. I don't want them to be off a little bit or whatever. Okay, so it's cooled down. I'm going to take it and set it here. Alright, and now we'll clean that up with some... I use 350 degrees Celsius there. You can use 330, it'll do the same thing. I held my hot air wand back pretty far though, so if the actual temperature hitting the actual stencil is probably far less. Like I was a good 1.5 away from my stencil. Alright, let this dry. Alright, we'll take a look at our chip there. As you can see, we got our new reball on it. Everybody's got some lead on there. You can see our little lead balls. About an inch to 2 inches, right in that area. But there is our baseband CPU. Reballed. Ready to be placed back down on there. If you want to use pre-made balls, you can get them a little taller than this, but this is plenty. You can do the same, it just takes practice. Get one that you don't have to worry about messing up on, and just sit there and practice it. Dry your paste out. Don't use paste that has a lot of flux in it. The paper towel can help, I guess, from the actual thing moving too much, maybe. Yeah, you really have to watch the paste as you heat it. So as you're heating it, the paste will act differently. If you're rolling heat on it, it's gonna act really differently than when you're just barely heating it. So like if I came in here, like we'll look at this right here on the edge, there's a little bit of paste that I've scraped up. If I come in, see how I can heat it and it kind of just doesn't do much? Now watch, it'll slowly change. See how it's just slowly melting? What?
The serial number for the Mac.
Yeah.
Or is it on the bottom of the thing?
It's on the bottom of the MacBook.
Okay.
Now if I come in here and I'm just blasting it, see how it just fucking immediately starts to take off? But if you come in here and you heat slowly, you can watch this here. See how it's slowly melting? Like it really depends on how fast, how hard you come in with your heat, everything. I mean, there's a lot of factors, and that all comes from experience. I mean, you just have to do it. Trust me, when I first started doing basebands, it was absolute nightmare. I did the same thing. I had balls bleeding out everywhere. Like everything would bridge. I'd have to do them like 6 or 7 times, but it was just an absolute nightmare. Just letting paste sit will dry it down. Yeah, if you leave the container of paste open, it'll dry out. Another way to do it is turn your hot air down to like 200 degrees Celsius and keep it a far distance away from the paste and just let it wet itself, let the flux come out of it, and then you can dry the flux that way out of the paste.
Yeah, we do.
But I leave my container open. I don't seal it up. It's always cracked open. So the top layer of paste here is pretty dry. So like it's not very liquidy. It's like really thick peanut butter.
Okay, awesome, thank you.
A lot of people will be like, well, that's bad for it, but I mean, the lead's not rusting. It's okay. It's in a liquid syringe. Yeah, that's what I had before I got the tub. I bought the tub afterwards. Oh man, I bubbled my desk.
You did what?
I bubbled my desk up.
Because it's a piece of plastic.
Your piece of plastic.
Your shoe.
That's not very nice. Alright, so let's get back to this iPhone 7. Nice balls. You like my balls?
Okay, Mark sent me the prices.
Touch on my balls.
What is the labor charge and what was the price for this back panel?
85 for the back panel.
And then what's the labor charge?
I was charging like $100 and something for
Okay, I
labor.
need to know so I can do that.
Well, what are you at right now?
That's the... How much was the back thing?
85. It was like 1100 something, I think. That's what I quoted.
$1,099 for the parts by themselves.
1099. Yeah. So I was gonna charge them about $100 something.
Okay.
Just put $100 on it.
$100 labor.
Yeah. It was like 12 something after tax. Yeah. Micah's at the Franklin store. What's up with the 7? The 7 boot loops, but never... It boots up, like 3U Tools sees the actual phone, but it never will show the desktop or like the setup screen or anything. Home button vibrates when you press it. 3U Tools sees the phone and can read all the information on it, but it says on the screen it just has the Apple logo. So I always thought with the audio IC that the phone would still boot, but evidently everybody last night was saying no, audio IC, if it's broken on a certain trace, will not let it show anything. So audio codec is the problem. Yeah, Alex, you're correct. All the audio ICs that I've seen so far will boot up if you press on them, but this one will not. Like, I pressed on it and it will not boot. So I had kind of given up on it yesterday, and I told him that I didn't have time to keep messing with it. But after reading what Lauren said and what everybody else has kind of confirmed, if it is audio IC indeed, I have time to go back and mess with it. Why would I not fit a new baseband? What do you mean? The one that I did? That's just a parts board. I'm not going to mess with that thing. That parts board is missing the SD RAM. It was one of my... Oh, are you talking about put a new one on a phone? Yeah, you can't change them because the IMEI information is stored on there. You would have to reprogram the baseband CPU with the old information to put a new one on. It's possible to do. It's possible to put a new baseband on, but you would have to have the old IMEI info. They do make programmers for baseband CPU and baseband EEPROM and the EEPROM chip. Excuse me, not baseband EEPROM, but the EEPROM chip in general. I fixed the iPhone 7. Oh, 7 iPhone 7 so far. Yeah, we did. I think we did 4 or 5 last week that were all audio IC or baseband PMIC issues. It's definitely becoming more common, and it's going to be just like TriStar issues. It'll only be a matter of time before it's $12. Somebody's doing it for 12 bucks somewhere. We do it for 12 bucks. That's all you gotta do. Yeah, 1707. Alright, so should only have maybe one more screw to take out here, if any. No, just camera modules. I think they do have a baseband programmer. Like, you have to do chip off, but I'm pretty sure they do. I think the company that makes the Navi Plus has one. Maybe I'm confused with some other chip, but I'm pretty sure it does baseband. Alright, so let's pull the audio IC codec off and look under it and run our jumpers. Hopefully when we pull the audio IC, we have immediate obvious issues, which I've had on some of them. This is going to be a 7 Plus. I don't have a board holder for it yet. Including your personal phone? Yeah. Ashley's got a 7 Plus, so I'm just waiting for it to have problems.
It'll never have problems.
Yeah, it will.
It's had problems since I got it. My keyboard just freezes. It has stupid problems.
Alright, so well, I just shot a screw off into space. I don't know where it went. It helps when your board is secure. Screw did I send into orbit? Looks like one of the Wi-Fi screws. It's okay. I can get another one of those. Alright, so we want to cover up our NAND since we're going to be right next door to it. And we're going to cover up PMIC because PMIC is over on the opposite side. And neither one of them likes heat because they are underfilled. Underfilled chips don't like heat. Alright, Joshua, have a good one. Have I tried using my i7 board holder for the 7 Plus? I think I tried, but I don't think it fits properly. Let me check again, but I'm pretty sure it didn't fit right. Like it was off a little bit. Like not perfectly set up for it. I think it was down at the bottom and up at the top it didn't fit correctly. Yeah, it didn't sit right. It won't sit down in the actual holder. It sits on top of it. Yeah, it won't work. Guess we can do it like that. No. Won't hold it. The 7 fits properly, but the 7 Plus doesn't. I got it flipped around. Alright. So let's get some flux down in here. I'm going to turn my temperature up a little bit because the iPhone 7s take a little more heat. And I don't want to be sitting around here pumping heat onto this board forever. So I've gone from 350 up to 380. And that should help us get this chip off at a little faster rate. So we're not just heat soaking the crap out of the board. Hopefully I can pick up the audio IC without too much issues. Every now and then these things slip out of my tweezers. So I'm just tapping the sides of the chip, waiting to see when it moves. Okay, so it should be soon. Yep, it's going to give me problems. Here it goes. This chip never wants to come up right for me. There we go. We'll flip it out of there. Move my cat back over here. Alright, there we go. Let's see if we chip that. I hate when they slip off because I'm always afraid it's going to chip the IC itself. Well, it looks okay. I can grab them any other time. It's just whenever I'm pulling off the board, that audio IC just never wants to come up right. Every other chip acts perfectly fine. Alright, so first things first, we need to clean up our board here and see if any of our pads come up, which is the most common thing to happen. And the jumpers that will be run are this trace here, which is the most common one to fail. This trace here, this one, and this one. So I'm going to go ahead and put some flux down while it's still warm, so it'll kind of melt in there. What's up, Paul? And I'm going to load up the tweezers here with a little bit of a solder ball, and I just want to carefully go in here. I'm not touching the board with my actual tweezers, I'm just touching it with the actual solder. My goal here is just to pick up the old solder and not anything else. Alright, so we'll flip it around so I have better angles for the other side. Alright. That should be clean enough. I don't think we had any pads come up. Four boxes out of 6 boxes uninformative. Yeah, I mean, I'll probably end up getting a green screen. That way I can just do me and the background image. Chat though is kind of important, so I may do a filter out but still have a chat overlay. I keep the chat overlay there because we do stream across on Twitch also, and that chat actually has both. So people on Twitch can actually see what YouTube is saying and vice versa. So I'll probably keep that, but yeah, I'm definitely going to probably switch it around. Usually right on the one below me right here, there's usually a camera view directly of the board. The box that way, right there, that box is the donation box, and the box on the very end down there was the multimeter, but it does not always work. So let's go in here with my dull razor blade, and I'm going to try to scrape back these traces. Probably gonna have to get a sharp blade. That way I ain't gonna cut it literally. Literally will not cut it. Alright, so now we'll scrape back these traces. There's one. There's two.
Mike, it said still won't boot. The power button is illuminated now, but still won't power on.
Ask him how the power button runs.
I mean, like, how does the power
Is it separate from the keyboard? Is it part of the keyboard? Is he sure the power button itself is like actuating properly? He should be able to test that with a multimeter. Okay, so we'll clean that up. See if we need to scrape it some more. Oh, those are pretty well exposed. We'll put some flux down here. Now I'm going to use only half of my tweezers here because I need a little finer working size.
This guy, he asked me if he can have the MacBook down. Does he have to pay first? Is that
No, we have his Mac here. Yep, that pad came off. Barely touched it. So that may have been our problem the whole time there.
Do you want me to message Order
Yeah,
first?
just, he already has.
He already ordered them?
I told him to. Has he not?
I don't know.
That's what I told him last week. He said they'd be here this week.
Okay.
What is the spray? It's just compressed air. Alright, so get my magnet wire here. And we'll have to figure out what way is going to be most comfortable. Most likely just this direction is going to be the easiest for me. Okay. I'm going to come in, I'm going to tin this wire here. Okay, got that tinned. I'm going to tack it on the end first. So I've got it tacked down at the very end. And now I'm going to move it into position. Alright, so I want to hold that wire down. Actually, I want to move it at the very top. It's not tied down where I want it. Alright, now it's touching the resistor. So I'm going to hold my wire down in place and touch. Okay, the resistor took that. I'll touch the end of my wire to make sure that it is exposed, that it has solder on it. And then I just want to come in and press down through that wire. Make sure it's okay, so it's attached to the pad next to it. There it goes, came off anyway. I want to make sure that this wire is not too long. So I'm going to pick off a little bit of the excess there. Alright, so that's one done. Now we'll move on to our next one. Okay, so again, same process. I want to tack it up near the actual component. Okay, so it's tacked down. And now I'm going to tack it on the other end, on the pad. Alright, so it's tacked to the pad. Now I'm going to try to tack the in-between here without causing too much of a mess, which we have a little bit now. I need to move my end of my wire over so we're not touching what we don't need to touch. See if I can use my blade here. There we go. I'm going to hold that wire down and try to tack that top piece back down. Alright, there we go. That wire is tacked on both ends and tacked on the actual tray some. And we got two more to do. Are these open circuit? No, these wires just fall on a bend point. The most common one to fail is the one up here. But what normally happens is where this phone bends is right here next to the SIM tray, which is on the opposite side of the NAND. And the bend point that it flexes on causes disconnects in these lines, which causes open circuit. So when they go open circuit or they get a slight disconnect in the line, it causes interference or noise on the AP lines that they talk to. And by doing that, causes the phone to lag up, causes it not to boot, causes it to boot loop, has a bunch of weird symptoms. So what we do to kind of help try to future-proof this, make it where it doesn't come back or doesn't happen again, or it can't happen, which honestly this trace up here is fairly robust, but the goal here is to create a secondary, more stable trace pretty much. So we're making our own trace here. This one is not cooperating. Alright, there we go. One doesn't follow the trace very well, but I'm going to undercoat this anyway. Alright, so those are all trimmed up. We're going to clean it up. Alright, so we got our guys run there. Let's make sure these are not too close to that. This one is out on the pad where it should be. This one, while not exactly the best way run, is connected. This one is a little long. I'm going to trim it just a little bit. Okay. Now we're going to do our conformal coating over the actual strands of wire that are hanging off. That way these don't touch anything or cause any problems. And plus, whenever we go to solder our new, well, not new, our reballed audio IC back down, we won't have issues with these wires moving on us. Don't be worried if you get any on other pads. This stuff cleans up really easily. Just go ahead and cure it and then come back and clean it up. Conformal costing. It's conformal costing. Conformal coating. I assume that's what Alex was trying to say. Unless he was making a remark on the fact that it costs money to put that stuff on. Yeah, it's a UV solder mask is what it is. So what I'm using right now on it is a UV light. Big old UV light. To cure it. And then once it's cured, we can go back in and it'll be hard. That way the wire won't move and it's easy to work with. Jump all the via pads? No, I just jumped all the traces here that are along this edge. So now I'm going to clean up around these other points. So just take your tweezers and just kind of rub it and it'll take it off. You don't have to do anything crazy. So that's cleaned up. Let's clean up this stuff here. Alright. Make sure I got it nice and cleaned out in between those two. I don't want, when we put our chip back on, I don't want it to sit on top of those and not let the solder reflow properly. The one I have is in my description down there. Should be at least. It's like a 10-watt UV LED lamp. It's really bright, really bright. It cures the solder mask pretty much instantly, as long as it's not like 8 inches thick. Alright, so let's clean this up here. Again, I'm not touching the actual chip, I'm just letting the solder ball pick up the old solder for me. And that way we can reball this one with some new leaded solder, which will lower our working temperatures greatly. So we can put this back on at a faster rate and less chance of messing up anything around it. It does work great for nail painting. If you want to paint your nails, you can use your UV light to cure it. and then have a nice night out on the town. If you need a suggestion, Spectre has opened up his Q&A.
Do you still want insurance on the body like part with the soles?
No.
No? Okay. Okay. It's still okay with all that over, but we were transferring it over.
Yeah, I thought that's what we told her.
We did, but I
Oh.
don't recall.
Maybe that's why our insurance was so high.
Well, no, like this is still on your policy.
Oh, is it?
Yeah, I was worried that when the doctor's homeowner would go up. So much if they she'll be able to put all those together. Because it's too much of Lord.
Got one little dot here that's not cleaned up.
$100 for the homeowner came out.
A combination of silicone and something else. I mean, I haven't had any problem with this stuff, so I mean, I'm sure there's many ways to accomplish the same goal, but this is the one that's worked for me, so I'll just stick with it. Nothing I'm saying here means I'm absolutely correct or it's the best way or anything. It's just the way that methods I use, so you really gotta find what works for you, and if there is something better out there, by all means, use it. And if there is something better that you know about and you don't let me know, I'll be upset. You miss Micah dropping shit?
Don't worry, he's still doing it.
He still drops it, you just don't get to hear it now. If Micah drops stuff in Franklin but no one's around to hear it, does he really drop it?
Yeah, because I have to clean it up and put it out.
Okay, audio IC is reballed. Yeah, this coating stuff is really easy to remove. I mean, it doesn't take a whole lot to get it off the board. Yep, there's a chip in that where I thought it was. I don't want to put that back on. Wish I'd seen that. So where my tweezers slipped right there, it did chip the actual IC. This IC may work, but I really don't want to risk it. So we'll grab another one and reball another one. Okay. Make sure. Okay, that one's good. What's the number? 30. Let's see. 338S00105. 338S00105. Okay, same chip. So we'll go ahead and pull this one off. I'm just going to flip this one over instead of trying to pick it up. That way I don't have to risk chipping it. We will wreck everything around it in the process. Alright, so we got that one off. No flux, so it looks terrible. But that's okay. Not worried about how it looks. As long as the chip's not damaged. Broccoli pieces are like little mops for garlic sauce. That sounds pretty accurate. I would say that is a correct assumption. Okay, flip this around. Alright, that audio IC is clean. Well, not clean, but ready for solder. Am I changing the temperature? No. Same working temperature. I never really fluctuate my temperatures unless I'm working on thinner boards or heavier boards. The iPhone 7 is a bit heavier, so I do run a little higher temperature to take stuff off. Just to get it off there a little faster, but other than that, it's all about the same. I don't change a whole lot. Now, if you're doing like FPCs and stuff, I do turn my temperatures down just because the plastic itself is a little more sensitive to heat, so I don't want to sit there and just roast it. Okay, let's look at where our cutouts are. They're this way. Our chip lined up. Okay, we got our paste down. That's a nice reball there. Okay, let's clean that up. Okay, our IC is nice and cleaned up there. Rotate it around. Let me check pin 1. I believe it's in the orientation that we're in. I believe it's in the top left, but just want to make sure. No sense in risking it. Putting it on wrong can cause some serious issues at times, just depending on how it's laid out, how the chip sends and receives power and stuff. You don't want to cross two of them up and send some power where it doesn't need to go. But I'm fairly confident pin 1 is in top left where we are as far as orientation. We'll check and make sure. Yes, so top left is pin 1. So from this orientation, my pin 1 is up here. So I'm going to look at my IC at an angle and I can see the mark in the top there. So I want to put down some flux. Not a whole lot because this chip has a tendency to float. And I don't want it moving around too much. Even though our temperature should be lower working here, I still want to cover up my NAND just to prevent any issues along with PMIC. I'm going to get that IC into a rough area where I think it should be. I'm going to heat it until that flux starts to boil out from under it. Okay, release the IC. And now I'm going to let it kind of pull itself into place. I want it to do all the work for me. Okay, so the IC just moved. It moved again, and it moved again. Okay, so I tapped it and it moved back. I want to make sure there wasn't a whole lot of flux there, so I'm going to go ahead and put some more down and just refill it one more time. I really want to see that chip really snap back pretty well. Okay, that was good. It moved back for me really quickly. First time it moved back, but it didn't move back very well. Searching on the 5S is the same as the 6. It can be baseband, yes. The baseband, though, I believe on the 5S is underfilled, so it's going to be a completely different ball game as far as it goes with fixing the issue, and you're going to have to see if it's worth the time invested and money invested for you to do that. Okay. So I always like to really lay some alcohol to these after you clean them up, and then blow out the excess flux in the alcohol, and then come back in and scrub it again, just to make sure that we've got as much of that flux out under it as we can get. Okay, so if we look down there, we don't have any solder balls here or here around PMIC, and our audio IC is back on. I'm just going to clean up the flux residue on the back of the chip. That way it looks nice, brand new, and shiny. Now it looks like a fresh new chip. There we go. Well, let's see if this thing will boot now. So before we were just getting Apple logo and it was hanging there. Never would complete boot. Now we need to see if we get a completed boot process. And if we do, I'm going to store that one in the memory banks, and know if I see a phone like that again on the 6S or newer, that I kind of know what the problem's going to be, because the 6S tends to share a lot of the symptoms that the 7 has. So like if you're getting boot looping and error 4013, it can be baseband PMIC on the 6S series. If you're getting no boot completely, maybe the 6S shares the same audio IC problems. I do not know how well this battery is charged, so I'm going to hook up my DC power supply instead. Now the DC power supply does not duplicate the battery SWI information, so the phone will start up and probably boot loop eventually, but it should have enough time to boot up properly and completely. Alright, so we're going to press the power button here. Alright, we have our Apple logo, so let's see if it boots up now, or if it just hangs like it always does. Alright, so we're pulling, let me turn my current up because this thing will pull a little higher than a normal iPhone will. These pull about 2.2 amps on boot. The older iPhones don't go over. Well, there you go. So it booted up. We now we're at the home screen, and we have touch. Home button works. So that was the solution. Audio IC was the problem. So we just needed to run jumpers. So this phone now, so the reason they wanted this one fixed is this phone was dropped. This is the screen that was on it. It's all broken, and they needed to turn it in for an upgrade, but they can't turn the phone in if it doesn't boot up. So that's pretty awesome. Good to know. And I'm sure people out there knew those symptoms before. I had never seen an audio IC cause it to not allow it to get past the Apple logo. Usually pressure would allow them to boot all the way up, but in this case pressure would not let this one boot up. Pressing over the audio IC did nothing. So good to know. Anyway, I'll spare you all the boring part of putting this thing back together. We'll end stream on a high note before I screw something up and have to do it off camera. Thank you all for watching as always. It's awesome that we still have a dedicated community that shows up even when I'm gone for weeks. Thank you all for sticking around. And it's pretty cool. We're almost at 3,500 subs. The channel's grown even though I haven't been around very much. But again, I'm trying to stream more and more as much as I can and try to answer all the questions you all have. And hopefully you've learned something. You all have a good night, and I will see you all maybe tomorrow. I think we'll have some good stuff in the mail-in that we can do on stream. That'll be a little different than the traditional, hey, I got a touch IC to do. But everybody have a good night, and I will see you all later. Bye.